New Balance Hoops is changing the game with a roster built for the future. Aaron Nesmith, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine. Cooper Flagg is the newest NBA draft pick, and Cam Brink, who's raising the bar for women's basketball. Whether it's the Hezzy V2 for quick cuts, the two-way V5 for all-around play, or the Kawhi 4 for those who never stop climbing, New Balance Hoops makes shoes built for every player. Visit newbalance.com/basketball to explore more.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got ourselves an excellent podcast today as we're going to be joined by one of our good friends, Rocco Miller. He does such an incredible job over at Bracketeer.org, taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love all 12 months out of the year, as we're going to be chatting with him a little bit about what we've been seeing in terms of these teams getting everything squared away and set with regards to their non-conference schedules. Additionally, we're going to be diving in with him about some of the things that we have been seeing this offseason. A few of the teams that he's feeling a little bit bullish/bearish on. With Rocco, I know that he is just a wealth of information, and with Rocco, he truly does a great job of being able to gauge all 364 teams in college basketball, and we're going to be chatting with him about some of the, shall we say, diamonds in the rough and the mid-majors. So we're going to have a great chat with Rocco. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to the funds that they want 24/7, 365 on leap years, 366 days out of the year, as all gambling transactions, they get approved every single time. When you go to edgeboost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G, because that'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with the man that does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. I know that he's also doing a little bit of work with Trilly Donovan's new site, as well as Trilly Donovan really building something out there. Still don't know who it is. Nobody knows who that is, not even Rocco Miller. I've actually talked to him away from the scenes, and I know a few people that do work for Trilly Donovan, and they don't even know who he is. So, and that makes things very interesting to say the least. So he's done a great job in 2025 of being able to keep a low profile. But Rocco, he has a great profile of being able to gauge this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, and then the number 8 altogether. And Rocco, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, great to be on with you, Greg. What's been going on in your world?
What's been going on is a lot of heat out here in lovely Las Vegas, but also getting set for what is going to be an insane college basketball season. And Rocco, I know you do such a great job of being able to take a look at this great game of college basketball, and you're big on the scheduling side of things. With regards to scheduling, what does that really say about some of these teams? Because there are some teams that they schedule a lot of cream puffs. There are some teams that they really muscle up. They try to challenge themselves. Just how do you take a look at a team schedule and what they're all laying out in comparison to what their expectations might be for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I think there's some takeaways that you can get. I think one really interesting one that came out not long before we started the show today is Miami. Miami's a very interesting team. Obviously hiring Jai Lucas, bringing in a ton of talent. You know, their schedule, I think, was very disappointing. 9 games at home. They will have a couple really huge tests. Part of that's baked in because they've got the ACC SEC Challenge game, and they were dealt a tough one playing on the road in Oxford at Ole Miss. They get Florida in a neutral site game over in Jacksonville, which will also be pretty great because that's November 16th, the second weekend of the season. So we'll get a quick litmus test on how together they are that early. You know, their MTE's okay. Like, they have BYU, who's obviously tremendous. So if they play BYU, that's going to help their scheduling numbers a lot. But there is a scenario where we don't know what the bracket is. There's a scenario where they might not play BYU at all. If that's the case, they just play Dayton and Georgetown. It's a significant difference between BYU combined with either of those two. So after that, the 9 home games, there's really nobody of significance. Southern Miss is probably the biggest name, but they're projected in like the 290s right now. And it is really a lot of cream puffs from there. Perhaps Elon could be good out of the CAA, but really not much at all out of the 9 home games. So again, this is just kind of a microcosm of the greater issue with college basketball at the high major level. Is for many of these power conference schools, especially if the coach has been there 4 years or less, is really my barometer, Greg. They'll just go ahead and overload the schedule with home games, try to beat teams by 50. If the net expects you to win by about 30 or 32, you're gaming the system with each result if you have an athletic team that can run up the score. And that's actually resulting in tournament selection. It's not a great spot for the sport because it's really silly at the end, being able to run up the score against a bad team, and that's the difference of you being in the net top 25 or in the net top 50. It's pretty silly when you look at it. And it's also disappointing because we're just about a month removed from the ACC announcing they're going to drop 2 ACC conference games so these teams can go schedule harder. Well, what we saw from Miami, what we saw from Notre Dame earlier, and what we saw from Wake Forest earlier this week is there's really not much interest or appetite in doing that. Why don't we just go ahead and get some more home games? That's what it tells you. You can read between the lines. There's no arguing once the schedule's official. And not to pick on the ACC too much because the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Big East, they all do the same thing. It's just an unfortunate circumstance in college basketball when you have full control over your schedule and these 5 conferences have the money to basically go out and buy whoever they want to play.
Yep, it is very interesting because when you're a lesser team and you're getting like several $100,000 to play against, insert your SEC, your Big Ten, your ACC school here, obviously you're going to take that money because that's going to be funding your facilities. That's going to be funding perhaps an NIL collective to be able to match up with some of these teams as well. So it is a little bit of an unfortunate circumstance, and I'm so glad that you brought up the ACC, and that's obviously an example of the bad. And if they're in the ACC, there's a lot of teams that they need as many wins as humanly possible because we know that the ACC has been really killed by those bubble teams or these lesser teams in the conference just not being able to get the job done. But what's an example of a little bit of a better team that was really able to go out there, schedule tough, and they're really going for it this season?
Well, I think, NC State's taking a fun approach, at least compared to the others. First of all, like with Darian Williams there and a great cast of coaches led by Will Wade and cast of players behind Williams. I think they're ready to go out and compete. They've got UAB and VCU for home games. Those are obviously much more challenging home games than the majority of these teams. They're going to play at Auburn. They got dealt a good hand there as part of the challenge. They went out and got Ole Miss in a neutral court game in Greensboro, so it's more of a home game, but still counts as neutral for all their resume metrics. They'll play in a weaker Maui field, but in Maui, they could get a crack at Texas. They could get a crack at USC, get some big wins. They might actually win that thing. I think this roster is good enough for them to win the Maui Invitational, and they get to play Kansas at home. And I think just some of the underpinnings outside of that is they're going to host Liberty. They're going to host UNC Asheville. They're going to host UNC Greensboro. So Will Wade is making each of his games matter. You and I know they could slip up and lose. Between Liberty, Asheville, Greensboro, VCU, UAB, they could easily go 4-1, maybe even 3-2, especially with everybody being new there. But Will Wade against the world attitude, both on the court, with the roster, and with the schedule. So I think that's been commendable. I think if the rest of the ACC was more like Will Wade, the league would get the numbers out of it that they want. But unfortunately, you've got situations like Mark Madsen at California. I feel for him going into his 3rd year. They haven't been able to get it rolling yet. They're, of course, going to go pretty soft on the schedule. I mentioned Notre Dame, Miami, and Wake Forest that's already announced. You kind of figure Stanford's in that boat as well once that comes out. Boston College. Even Boston College is scheduled harder than them because they've got LSU. They're going to Florida Atlantic. They're in a decent MTE in Orlando. They go to Temple. Give Boston College some credit. I don't expect a ton out of the Eagles this year. They might even get bottom of the league, but hey, at least they're going to play some people. Louisville's done a good enough job. They did the Valentine's Day game with Baylor. They're going to play at Tennessee in the return game. They're going to start a new series with Memphis. They've got a marquee matchup at Arkansas and versus Indiana. They're playing Kentucky. They're playing Ohio University, who's always pesky. And they're going to play Cincinnati in Cincinnati. So, man, Louisville, obviously they think they're a top 10 caliber team. Playing anybody, anywhere, anytime. You love that. Duke and North Carolina are in their own category, so I'm not going to touch on them. They always have big games. So I do think like the Louisvilles and the NC States are helping the league, and maybe even Boston College, if you can believe that. But I think there's just a lot of these other teams stuck in the mud that are afraid to really do much.
Yep, there certainly are. And with the ACC, it's going to be really interesting because we have seen quite a few of those teams fall on some tough times, to say the least. That's been reflected in the fact that they haven't gotten as many bids into the NCAA tournament and all those bubble teams, as we have talked about. A lot of times it's been scheduling that has caused them to come up short as well. So we will see if that's going to be the case once again this season, as we do have our good friend Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that it's interesting that you talk about the ACC and the fact that for some of these teams it might be a little bit more of a down year, but when you take a look at what we're getting league-wide in college basketball, is there perhaps a conference or two that you think might surprise and might have a little bit more quality than what we were thinking, and they have a lot of teams in that conference that's going for it? And I'll give you my example, the Missouri Valley Conference, with a lot of teams that, I mean, obviously it's like a high mid-major, as we like to call it, but you've got a lot of teams with a lot of chemistry coming back, the likes of Northern Iowa, Illinois State. These are teams that are scheduling some tough opponents, and these are teams with a lot of chemistry that I think that they are legitimately gunning to try to be able to get a 12 seed in the NCAA tournament or turn the Missouri Valley into a two-bid league.
Yeah, no, the Valley's awesome. And one of the great things when we're, talking scheduling as part of this is the Valley made a mandate last year. It carries forward this year that everybody in the league has to play 4 quad 1 or 2 games. And there's actually a list that gets sent around on the teams that are eligible for you to go schedule. And then anybody that's not listed would not be eligible. So it's been fun for me as kind of a consultant for pretty much every team in the Valley to go out and try to find these games. And that process started last year. And so you're seeing a lot of creativity there. Now, if you're a bad team in the league, like Evansville, Valpo, been stuck towards the bottom traditionally in these last handful of years, they're trying to really go after kind of the bottom of that list. But even so, that helps bring the floor up for the league. Even if Evansville's going on the road, and you probably saw they're on Notre Dame's schedule that came out earlier. Did they go out and play Notre Dame close? That's going to be good for the league, right? Just lose that game by single digits. Everybody's going to have to play for these games at least. I know teams like Belmont have 5 or more. Bradley's going pretty big. They've got 5 or more. And Murray State loves their team on paper, so they're going to play a lot of big ones. I think above the 4. What I noticed last year was obviously we still were in a situation where the only chance for 2 bids was Drake losing the championship game to Bradley. I think was the best scenario. Didn't work out. Drake won it, which wasn't bad either. But we might get in a situation like that. I think the really interesting thing is you look at the projections per Bart Torvik. You've got Illinois State's the only projected top 100 team at 96, but you got Bradley at 101, Northern Iowa at 105, Belmont at 110, Murray State, very talented, possibly big-time sleeper team, 125. Drake's a team, I think, again, like last offseason, everybody's probably sleeping a little too much on. Really good roster. Eric Henderson's been a winner at South Dakota State for a long time. And Drake themselves as an institution, they're kind of the Utah State of the Missouri Valley, Greg. They should be coach agnostic after what DeVries and McCollum did. They're at 138. Southern Illinois is much improved at 140. And Illinois Chicago sneaking around at the 160s with some upside players. So I expect that group of 8 to be very competitive. And then the bottom 3 of Evansville, Indiana State, and Valpo certainly have enough there to make a move into the top 8. So I like the Valley just from a standpoint of the floor is really high. They can only really improve on these numbers as well from the top 8 up, because typically you'll see the top 2 or 3 Valley teams be top 100 teams, with that number 1 team being a top 50 team. So curious to see if we can achieve that again for the league this year. But to name a couple other leagues that I'm super high on, I think the Ivy League is going to be incredible. Harvard is bringing back almost everybody, led by Hinton, their player of the year from last year, freshman of the year. And they've got most of their, I think, top 8 back. If Harvard's ever going to make a move in this year, it's got to be this year. Yale's always tremendous, and they're projected to be a top 100 team once again at 91. Brown actually is bringing most guys back. They had the unfortunate injury before last year started. They'll be very good. Cornell runs amazing stuff. We all know what Princeton can do. Dartmouth's coming off of a historic year. And then you have Columbia and Penn, who made very outstanding hires. I think with Kevin Hovde going over to Columbia, he's going to bring that Florida offense. Obviously a bunch of under-recruited, under-rated players, but I think he'll get the most out of them. And I think by Ivy League play, Columbia is going to be very competitive. And then Penn under Fran McCaffrey, Obviously, just with McCaffrey there, they're going to be dangerous. I think long-term Columbia and Penn are in pretty good hands. So this league 1 through 8 right now, the race for that top four, that might be the best inter-conference race anywhere in the country.
Yeah, and I actually just did my Ivy League conference preview last week. I think that that is going to be an amazing conference. You've got so much returning, and Princeton, a team that is always an institution out there with having Caden Pierce not be in there this year for them. That could cause them to slip out of that top four, which you just don't see that very often because you talked about Dartmouth and the way that they were able to ascend last season. So that's going to be one that I'm going to be very much taking a look at. And with calling out some of the power conference teams that have not scheduled so well. Coming up next with Rocco, I want to call out some of the teams that have done a good job with regards to their scheduling. We've also had Rocco doing a lot of travel in terms of a lot of these like Adidas events, a lot of these, shall we say, events for taking a look at these high school prospects, what have you. He's been able to talk to a lot of coaches. We're going to be chatting with him about some of the teams that, with his travels, he's starting to feel a little bit more bullish on. We're going to be chatting about that next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the BC Family Podcast.
New Balance Hoops is changing the game with a roster built for the future. Aaron Nesmith, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine. Cooper Flagg is the newest NBA draft pick, and Cam Brink, who's raising the bar for women's basketball. Whether it's the Hezzy V2 for quick cuts, the two-way V5 for all-around play, or the Kawhi 4 for those who never stop climbing, New Balance Hoops makes shoes built for every player. Visit newbalance.com/basketball to explore more.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by Rocco Miller. He does such amazing work over at Bracketeer.org. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. You are indeed able to follow him on the old Twitter side checks at Rocco Miller, the number 8 altogether. And Rocco, we were talking about this a little bit before. Some of the power conference teams have done a bad job with regards to their scheduling, but has there been a power conference that has really been able to stand out and are challenging themselves, are taking the opposite of some of those teams in the ACC's approach, and they decide, you know what, we are indeed going to go for it, and they decide, you know what, we're going to be muscling up, and we're going to be playing some good teams this season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a league-wide phenomenon, but I do feel like a lot of the Big 12 has actually tried to go get strategic games. BYU's schedule came out yesterday. They're projected to be a top 5, certainly top 10 level team with the crazy good roster they bring back. Richie Saunders, AJ DeBansta, and the whole core there. It looks tremendous. Now, I think they've done a really good job of not only making it look like they've got a bunch of strategic games, but putting themselves in position to be favored to win in most of those. I think maybe the only game they'll be an underdog would be in Boston against UConn. UConn also probably top 10 level, so that being a pretty much a road game. That might be where BYU stumbles on paper. But playing Clemson in New York, they're clearly a tier or two better than Clemson on paper. That MTE I mentioned already with Miami in it and Dayton and Georgetown, they're heavily favored to win 2 games in that. No matter who they get Wisconsin, which should be a tournament level team, but they play that in Salt Lake City. That's an extremely favorable game for BYU. And then you get Villanova opening night in Vegas. Obviously, Villanova brand new with Kevin Willard with some talent, but BYU largely expected to win that game. So I'm looking at a BYU team that should be 12-1, maybe 13-0 going into Big 12 play, but they don't have, because a bunch of those games are all not at home, it's going to help their resume tremendous, and it helps the league overall. But you stay in that league and you look at what Texas Tech did, I think that speaks for itself. Coach McCaslin really going for it, getting Arkansas and Duke on the calendar. A really good chance they'll play Purdue for the championship of the Baja Mar, barring any upsets. That adds to the list. They're going to Illinois, which is a big-time road test. Throw in LSU on a neutral court. I thought based on especially what Texas Tech did, a little bit lighter scheduling the first 2 years under McCaslin, they really stepped it up this year. I'm talking a lot with West Virginia, who's already got Wake Forest, Ohio State on neutral court games, a pretty good Thanksgiving tournament with Clemson, Xavier, Georgia. They'll play 2 of those. They're hosting Pittsburgh. And right now they're looking to add one more high quad 1 game. I'm pretty impressed with that since it's Ross Hodges' first year over there at West Virginia. What you see at Kansas every year is good. I think Iowa State's gotten a lot of slack for their scheduling over the years. It's a tiny bit tougher this year because they go to Purdue on the road in a true road game. Kudos for getting that series done. They'll play Iowa, who's going to be awesome with McCollum at home. They always play them, so not too much credit for that. But getting Mississippi State in the Pentagon, that's another quality game. And then they'll get 3 games at the Players Era. We know 2 of them are against the Big East best at St. John's and Creighton on the first 2 days. So Iowa State did their thing. I won't go into details, but Houston's got a bunch of good games and projected to be a top 1 or 2 or top 5 team. So I think the top of the league with those teams, Arizona as well. Arizona's playing Florida on opening night. They're playing UCLA in the Bill Walton tribute game. They're playing Alabama. They're playing San Diego State. They're playing on the road at UConn. They're hosting Auburn. Arizona's done their part. So I like what those top 6 or 7 projected Big 12 teams did, but it's a drastic difference for the bottom 4 or 5 in that league. So it's hard to get it done league-wide, but I do feel like the Big 12 is eager to kind of reclaim the top conference in college basketball. Whether they can do that or not is a different story, but at least they're scheduling for that.
Yep, that is nice to see because I know that there has been a lot of call-outs over the last few years about the fact that the Big 12 really didn't challenge themselves too much outside the conference, and as you could tell, as you laid out, that is going to be a little bit of a thing of the past for this season, at the very least, for a few teams, as we do have Rocco Miller, does great work over at bracketeer.org, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco, I know that you've been doing a lot of traveling, you've been taking a look at some of these recruiting events, you've been just taking a look at some of these teams all across the country, and as you've been doing your travels, are there a few teams now that over the last few weeks, over the course of the month of July, that you're just feeling a little bit better about? Maybe it's with some incoming freshmen, maybe it's just with talking to coaches, what have you, but are there just a few teams in general that you feel like they're in a better spot now than when you started evaluating them towards the beginning part of the offseason?
Well, I took a deep dive last week on the ASUN conference. Got a chance to go to practice at Queens. So Queens right now, if you're just going off Torvik model, again, a very easy thing for anyone listening to pull up as we talk. They're listed in the 240s, I think 245 at last check, 5th or 6th in the league. But I think there's a freshman there, Jordan Watford. Remember the name. In anything I'm reading so far, not much talked about him, but he's got a ton of talent. He'll be in the starting lineup, 6'5", really good body, can play 1 through 4 positions at that level. You know, with some of the guys they brought back, whether it be Chris Ashby, Bryce Cash, Nasir Mann, Berman, etc., they sprinkle in a really good transfer that I saw up close, Avante Parker, 6'9". We saw what he could do a little bit at Georgia Southern. He played about 13 minutes a game there. Coming into his junior year, going down a level from the Sun Belt over to the ASUN, I think what Coach Grant Leonard was talking about for him was just how much better he's gotten defensively, how easily and seamlessly he's fit in with the group. And at 6'9", they'll play him kind of everywhere, even the 5. I like this group from Queens. I think the most exciting thing about Queens, of course, is they got the approval from the NCAA to be eligible for this year's tournament. So the buzz around the program and the fact that the ASUN with, Lipscomb's coaching job flipped over to Kevin Carroll, who's going to do a great job there. But obviously losing most of their arsenal from last year's great team. I think North Alabama, Eastern Kentucky, you could argue are the favorites just based on what they got coming back. But they're still missing some parts at both of those places versus what they had last year. There's a real opportunity here for Queens to emerge. I feel like they're going to fight, and they're going to be, if not the most athletic team in the conference, they'll be a top 3 athletic team. So that one's definitely top of mind based on me spending a lot of time there last week. But outside of the Royals, I think just overall, I'm bullish on this Mountain West Conference. I'm really, now that Grand Canyon's officially in, Greg, I think that adds such a big depth piece that you're going to have 7 quality teams that should be top 80, I guess, maybe top 90. Between Grand Canyon themselves, of course, San Diego State, Utah State, Boise projected to be the top 3 in whatever order you have them. I really like Utah State personally, just because I do think the Aztecs are dealing with some off-season surgeries that I'm not quite sure how healthy they're going to be entering the season. So we have to stay tuned for that. But I love the hire of Eric Olin at New Mexico. Really, no doubt in my mind they're going to win enough games to be in the mix. That gives you a lot of quality there in the top 5. UNLV had a really good opportunity to sit down with their assistant coach, Scott Garson, while I was at the Adidas event. We talked for a long time about how excited they are about their roster, how invested the school is in the future of UNLV athletics. It's an exciting time there. They're going to have a really good team. And then Colorado State, that I don't think there's much of a drop-off going to Ali Farouk Manesh, who's been around under Nico the last several years in Fort Collins, knows the place well, held on to some talent, added some talent. They didn't schedule very hard from what I can tell so far, but I think they'll start hitting their stride in Mountain West play. So you've got 7 for sure quality. Nevada's usually in that mix too. This league's going to be really, really deep. And I think that Grand Canyon thing could move the needle to get them an extra bid.
Yep, with Grand Canyon joining the conference, I think that is absolutely massive. And, well, for the WAC, it's going to be a little bit whack as what we're going to be getting out there. Good news is, if you're a team like UT Rio Grande Valley or one of those teams, you're feeling a little bit better about your chances about perhaps being able to make the NCAA tournament. But yeah, that's going to be interesting to say the least. And Rocco, I know that you're doing such amazing work. Taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. You're tied into everything that we're seeing here in the offseason. You're getting all these schedules pumped out and so much more. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Hey, thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Yeah, my website is bracketeer.org. That's where you can find all this schedule information in one easy place by conference. Today, you'll see the SEC and the Big Ten. The Big 12 will be up probably by the time this drops as well. We just finished that up behind the scenes. And then, of course, Big East and ACC will be available here by early August. We've got a lot of people that work on that throughout the summer. So if you feel inclined, we have a support button listed there if you want to support our work. We've appreciated all the donations that have come in so far this summer. It's been awesome and really helps our guys keep going. On the other side of things, I'm doing work for basketunderreview.com, the brand new website platform that's been so fun to work on with Trilly Donovan. My first article dropped on the 23rd of July. So if you're listening to this, probably the last day or two. It's a 2-part series. So part 1 was on looking back at the 2022 hiring cycle led by Todd Golden and Chris Jans' prowess so far at Florida and Mississippi State. But also the greater story is the other 58 people hired that year, what we can take from that as we enter this year. And part 2, and that's really going to tee up part 2, which is looking at coaches that just finished year 2 and went into year 3. That's scheduled to be up by next Monday. Greg, by the time you and I talk again, I'm sure that will all be there and we can maybe go into some of the weeds, some of the findings, but really looking forward to it. It's been a fun project because, lots of different names come up that you kind of forget about. Going back through the Alabama A&M resignation from Otis Hewley Jr. And I kind of forgot the circumstances there before Dante Jackson jumped in. So just a lot of stuff, even for me, that I need to make sure I'm up to speed on, and so that'll be uncovered and should be a great resource for anybody to go back and look at things as well. Like if you're doing your own data projects or just tracking this for your own college basketball purposes. It's been a lot of fun. You can find me there. And outside of that, Field of 68 mid-major show, me and Sean Paul, we're going to be back again, and we're really excited to share. That's going to be a live show for the first time this year. And we might actually do some preseason episodes starting in August. So we'll keep everybody up to speed on that. You can follow me on Twitter/X or Blue Sky at Rocco Miller 8, where all this information will be announced as soon as it's available.
And our good friend Rocco does such an incredible job of looking at this game of college basketball. The mid-major show that he and Sean Paul, another man that joins this podcast, does. They do an incredible job there, and every single time Rocco joins me, he lends such amazing insight. So big thanks, Rocco, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. The name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. A big thanks once again to Mr. Rocco, who joined me in the last segment. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow.
New Balance Hoops is changing the game with a roster built for the future. Aaron Nesmith, Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine, Cooper Flag is the newest NBA draft pick, and Cam Brink, who's raising the bar for women's basketball. Whether it's the Hezilo V2 for quick cuts, the two-way V5 for all-around play, or the Kawhi 4 for those who never stop climbing, New Balance Hoops makes shoes built for every player. Visit newbalance.com/basketball to explore more.